Hello everyone, my name is Quentin Stotts and welcome to today's session titled Off You Go, Integrating Travel and Exchange Opportunities into Your FSL and Immersion Classrooms. And so if you're here, you are interested in travel and you are interested in giving your students the opportunity to travel, to experience the world, to delve deeper into those cultures that we've been teaching about, to really take their language learning to the next level and to develop real concrete proficiency. So in today's session, as you can see in this session detail, it is mostly aimed for Division 4 teachers. However, some of the opportunities certainly do apply to Division 3 teachers as well. They can also be really great pieces of motivation or ways to motivate your students if you don't quite teach Div 4. And there are a number of opportunities and experiences that I'll talk about. Some of them actually do apply to younger grades as well. So depending on what you would like to do with your students, I'm sure that you're going to be able to find an opportunity for your students there. So without any further ado, let's start. So before we get started, I'd just like to talk a little bit about myself to give you an idea of where I come from with all of this travel experience that I have, both personally and with students. So I'm originally from Hanna, Alberta, just east of Drumheller, and grew up in a very monolingual environment, but now I can speak many different languages. And one of the main reasons why I was able to do that and continue to be motivated to do that is because I was able to go on not one, but two exchanges during high school. So when I was 16 years old, I went off to Quebec, to Drummondville, Quebec, and learned French there as an exchange student. Then came back to Alberta and then immediately went off to Averøy, Norway, and did the rest of my high school in Norwegian. So you can just see in the top right corner here. And these experiences really showed me the value of travel and how important it can really be for our students. It can really create an immense potential in our students and give them so much to learn or so much to do, so much to learn. They can really give them a lot. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But also as a teacher, I have had the opportunity to travel with students in various capacities to various destinations. So, of course, I have lived in Quebec City for many years. I've traveled to Quebec City with students before. I've been to Paris, France, a number of times with students on school trips. I've been to Germany here, so this is in the south of Germany with students. This is Nice in France. I've been to Barcelona with students. I've taken students to Peru and to China, which have been really excellent experiences. And my school also operates a direct exchange with our twin school in Grenoble, France. And so here's just a picture of Grenoble. And every year I send and receive usually about 6 students with our direct partner school in France. And I do that in conjunction with sending students in various other places, notably to France again and to Quebec through the through Alberta Ed Exchanges, which we'll talk about, and their summer opportunities. And so I'm a really, really big fan and believer in the power of travel and exchange. And this is one of the reasons why I was kind of inspired to make this video. So first, I got a few requests. What are some of the opportunities that we have as French teachers in Alberta to create travel opportunities for our students? And what are some of the reasons why we should do that? It can be a lot of work. What is the payoff? And trying to support a few other teachers through this process, which, after you do it for a little bit is actually quite easy. I thought that it was now time to make a PD session for all teachers of Alberta, because there are many, many, many opportunities out there for our students. And importantly, many of these opportunities and programs are not reaching capacity, which means there's room. And especially in the French world in Canada, there's organizations that are willing to fund us to travel with our students or to send our students elsewhere. So why not become aware of those and let all students, regardless where they live in the province, have that opportunity? So, where's this presentation going? So, if you're watching this recording, there's kind of 6 stages of this presentation. So, 1, the value of travel and exchanges. 2, who should travel, when, and why, important considerations. 3, long-term travel experiences, which I kind of term exchange opportunities. Some of them are true exchange opportunities. Some of them are kind of exchange adjacent. Could be homestays, for example. The 4th section is travel opportunities. So these are short-term experiences. I kind of define those as if you don't have to do a couple loads of laundry while you're traveling, it's a short-term experience. Number 5, some best practices along with some pitfalls. And then number 6, those of you in the live audience would have time for questions. So let's dive down here. So travel is impactful. Many people know this. And it is not hard to find travel quotes which really put this in sharp relief. So we have Marcel Proust. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. You have the famous Islamic traveler, one of the most well-traveled people in the medieval times, Ibn Battuta. Traveling, it leaves you speechless, then turns you into a storyteller. We've got Mark Twain. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all of one's lifetime. What a great quote. And of course, we can always quote Tolkien when he creates his whole fantasy world, which is basically one giant travel story when you think of it. And it says, remember what Bilbo used to say. It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to. And that's very true. We don't know the impact all the time that these travel experiences have on our students. I've heard from students years down the road. They send me thank you emails, or they keep in touch and they say, well, I did this and I was able to do this, and that gave me something to talk about during an interview, or I met these really interesting people, or I decided what I wanted to do with my life. You really don't know the impact that these things can have on students. It can't be guaranteed, but it is powerful. And so that's why I'm quite passionate about it. And so the value of travel and exchange is really you could even think of it from a program or ministerial point, or a program really, yeah, or divisional level, is really that travel and exchanges are likely the most effective driver of building strong language and cultural competence that we have as tools as teachers. There are experiences that might not be for everybody, but there are experiences that we should offer as language teachers. And if you look at the FSL curriculum in particular, and you look at the front matter, it's got one really good sentence in there. It leads off the curriculum and it says, the overarching goal of this curriculum is to make students who are sufficiently competent in French to function outside the confines of the classroom. And exchanges are where students really get to develop their competency, test their competency, really see what's out there. Of course, they provide opportunities for student growth and personal growth, intellectual growth, professional growth, relationship growth. They don't come back the same, especially if it's a long-term opportunity. They do not just build lifelong memories, but they forge paths to the future. And they really, really do that. They create, sending students on exchange for a long-term exchange, or even sometimes just traveling for a couple weeks, can really help students develop a number of personal characteristics and skills and attributes which can be defining for their futures, unquestionably. It is also what I think it is an essential part of strong language programming. So what this means is when you try and build a really strong language program that goes over a series of years, and you want to take those students who enter your program and you want to take them somewhere by the time they leave your program. And you're not just thinking about your course, but you're thinking about the overarching language programming that you can offer your set of students. And building a language program takes time. It takes experience. There's a number of factors to consider, and this is one of them, because it can provide life-changing experiences for our students. They are important tools for student retention and motivation. And this is really good if you're going to talk to your administrator about why you should do these opportunities, it is about student retention and motivation. They are keystone experiences which draw kids into the program, get kids through the program, and leave kids with something so they start talking about the program when they're done. Because when you know that students are doing that, you know you've got a really strong language program. They're simply an attractive component of any program as well. And there is interest. There is interest out there. And, I'm from very, very rural Alberta, and there is interest. Sometimes we think there's not because our students are very good, but give them the opportunities. Let them see what's out there. Even show them this presentation. I'll send out the Google slides and the PDF later. You can just have them go through it and say, you know what, that sounds really interesting to me, right? You never know who's going to be interested in these. Students from all walks of life. And so, with that though, it is important to consider who should travel and why. Okay. And I've been sending students on exchange for the last 10 years, consistently, minus a little blip during COVID, obviously. But sending students, I've gained a lot of experience on maybe who should go on this type of experience. But I'm going to preface this by saying that travel is meaningful to anyone. Okay. So, I've taken even a couple students who you would think aren't necessarily the best travel students. And I've taken them all the way to China or to Peru or somewhere else. And, those experiences went fine. And they enjoyed those experiences and they were super meaningful to those students. And so it can be meaningful to anyone. But of course, when you're traveling with students or you're sending students abroad, there are some things that you want to consider. Not every student is necessarily suited to these types of experiences because they can be intense. And that comes with good things and bad things. So you might want to really consider vetting your students with what I say before you're gung-ho and just send anyone who signs up. Okay? So I find the best thing for you to do is to send students who genuinely want to travel and genuinely want to improve their language competence. This solves a lot of problems. Students who are going on exchange that don't want to go on exchange should not. It is not going to be a positive experience for them, and it will come back to you. Okay, I've made a few mistakes by sending students who are thinking, they maybe didn't reflect on the experience. They maybe weren't fully aware, and that's even a little bit on me, on what to expect. And maybe I had a little bit of an inkling already before they were going that, maybe this experience isn't entirely for this student, right? But you almost can't go wrong when you've got the type of student that says, I want to go, and I want to go for these reasons. Those are the students that you think, yep, and you're going to go. And sometimes the best evidence that you've kind of chosen the right student or it was the right experience for the student is they go and you almost don't hear anything from them until they come back, right? That's almost a good sign. No news is almost good news. And those students that genuinely want to be in the target language and integrate into their new societies and make new friends, those are the ones that have amazing opportunities, okay? You want to make sure that you are sending students who are emotionally and behaviorally mature to handle the experience. And I'm talking more so, about student travel. Well, actually, I'm talking about both, those short-term travel experiences and the long-term ones. You are sending ambassadors, right, of your school and of our province and of our country. You want to make sure that those students are good ambassadors because you are likely sending these students, especially if they're going on exchange, to areas and to communities who know very little about us and about your community here in the West. And whether our students know it or not, they are ambassadors, right? You want to send students who are curious, likely outgoing, right? So you, for example, you don't want to send a student on exchange that's going to hide in their room. They can be overwhelming experiences, and we need to support our students through those, right? And we're kind of like their coaches if they do have a little bit of a blip, right? Having a blip is okay. We're their coaches. But you don't want to send somebody who has crippling anxiety. It's not going to go well. You don't want to send somebody who suffers from, for example, severe depression. These type of experiences, eat, pray, love is maybe a little bit over exaggerated. You're not sending kids for therapy, okay, to have this difficult and or amazing experience to come back and be fixed and healed. You do not want to do that, okay? You want to send students who will appreciate the opportunity. And going to the next point down, you want to send kids who are good ambassadors, who want to go, not just those who can afford it either. There are many opportunities. I'm going to tell you that if families, they're like, I want my student to have this opportunity, but we can't afford the plane tickets. We can't afford to host another student in my family. There's opportunities for those students, and those students should certainly be able to go on exchanges, right? So to take that into consideration. If you're going to travel as a class and you're going to go somewhere on a trip, fantastic, amazing, highly recommend it. You want to send classes that have engaged in some language learning and want a shared experience. In my opinion, it doesn't actually so much matter whether you're going to go at the start, middle, or the end of a language program. So let's say that your program you're teaching high school, you start in grade 10, you end in grade 12, maybe you go in grade 10. Great. A lot of times kids, when they come back from these experiences, they want to learn even more, and it's a huge driver. Fantastic. Maybe it's in the middle. Most of my exchange students go in their grade 11 year. We get them as prepared as we can in grade 10. We ship them off in grade 11. They come back in grade 12. They're motivated. They're determined. They've already learned an incredible amount of French, and they just want to continue. Fantastic. Maybe you can send a kid in grade 12. It's totally possible. There's nothing that says you can't send a kid in grade 12. But of course, students in grade 12 have their diplomas. So you want to make sure that you're scheduling appropriately. You may be able to swing it depending on the kid's academic history and what courses they've already taken. You might be able to have them, for example, go the second semester of grade 12. And their first semester, they've just got their diplomas. Their second semester, they have much lighter courses that don't have diplomas. If you're going on a spring break trip or a summer trip or some other time, then the grade, it's easier. You can choose when they go, or take a mix of students. We often actually travel with students from across grades, and that's totally possible, and it's a fantastic way of doing things, okay? But in short, you want to send kids that want to go. You want to send kids that are good ambassadors. You want to send kids that are respectful, that are mature, that behave, okay? If your spider sense is tingling already, you might want to talk to a colleague. You might want to talk to your administrator. You might want to talk to that parent, right? Those are good conversations to have beforehand, okay? You can give them some what would happen if scenarios. What would happen if you do not like your exchange partner? What would happen if you're given a schedule in your francophone destination that you have no control over? What would happen if the weather is terrible? What would happen if all of these things, right? Those are some good kind of vetting questions that you might want to ask your potential candidates, right? Those can be sensitive conversations, but they're good conversations to have. Now, the other question is, well, for how long? And this really depends. At the school I work at, we offer both short-term and long-term opportunities. And we actually offer a couple of both because we're quite lucky to do that. Me and my colleagues are very kind of gung-ho on exchanges and these opportunities. So over the years, we've kind of built a system that allows us to do this that isn't super cumbersome. So if we divide these opportunities into two different categories, short-term and long-term, let's just talk about some of them. Short-term, great. They have less impact on academics. You don't have to schedule. You're going on a spring break trip. You're going on a summer trip. You're going on a November trip. Great, fantastic. It doesn't impact academics too much. They might miss 1 or 2 days of school. Usually, you can swing that with your principal. They can be very meaningful and impactful. Absolutely. And I'm going to talk about some experiences where you might not even be aware you're able to do in Canada, and they're really cool. Okay. One drawback is these short-term opportunities do not allow our students to experience culture shock. And I'm going to talk about culture shock. It's our next slide. It's a bit of a misnomer if you're not aware, and if you've never gone through it, you might actually kind of learn something about how culture shock works. Culture shock is a long-term process. If you are suddenly in a cultural environment, in a linguistic environment that is completely unfamiliar to you, and you're kind of like, oh my God, what is happening? That's actually not culture shock. That's cultural trauma. Okay, and that's a very, very big distinction there. We'll talk about that. The short-term opportunities can be quite involved. They can actually be quite a bit of work. You're traveling with students. You're designing a itinerary. You're going to go as a chaperone. You are collecting all of these permission forms, and you're getting permission from the division, and maybe you're getting your principal's input, and all of these. It can be quite involved for teachers. Once you've done it a couple times, it's very manageable, and it's totally doable. We do it every year at my school, but they can be a lot of work. They can. Okay, I enjoy that work, but they can be. Um, Often there's less bang for families' bucks. Okay, so the short-term opportunities, in an ironic way, cost usually way more money than the long-term opportunities, which is interesting to think about that. You know, I can send a kid to France for 8 weeks on a budget, really. Um, for me to take kids to France for 8 days would cost 3 times as much money. Okay, so that's also something to consider. All right. For long term opportunities, these are 1 month to a year that you're sending kids. This becomes the student's main priority and activity for that duration, and it is a priority. Sometimes for these long term opportunities, many high flying academic students want to go on these opportunities, and they should, okay? But sometimes they want to take their AP classes. Sometimes they want to do, they want to play a million sports. And sometimes you have to talk to the student and say, this is a big opportunity. This is not a sports team. This is a little bit more than that, because you're going to be living in this environment, and for us to do that, we got to change your schedule. We got to put you in certain classes. You've got to commit to this, which can be a great thing. Okay. It is a relational experience. So even if you look at the pictures down at the bottom of the slide, I've kind of tried to communicate that in pictures. Long-term opportunities, you are in school. You are managing experience or relationships. You are making friends. You are meeting new people from new cultures. You're having dinners. You're navigating the public transit system. You have to go shopping. You have to do all of these things that involve human to human relationships often, all the time. That's a fantastic experience. It's the best experience we can give. And when students come back, and they even years and years and years and years later, they say the best part of my experience wasn't the food, which was great, wasn't the school, which was great, wasn't the beautiful architecture, which was great. It was the people I met. And those are the people that are the most meaningful for the exchange. And that is harder to give in a short-term opportunity. In a short-term opportunity, you're sightseeing. You might have a local guide. You might, depending on how you organize it, maybe have a homestay, which can be really great, but it's probably going to be very short. And that's fantastic, but they might not be as relational. Okay. These long-term opportunities allow students to experience culture shock for better or for worse. It is a thing. And it's I think it's a positive thing for our students to go through when they are supported through that experience, which can be very difficult and or a wild ride. You know, it's kind of every student and every person reacts to it differently. Again, next slide. These are often life changing and life orienting in many ways, in unforeseeable ways. Students maybe think they're going one way, and then all of a sudden they're going to be going in another way. They're going to have a series of intense realizations, and come to a lot of conclusions about their own homes and about their own culture and about their own place in the world. It's impactful. Relatively low cost comparatively, okay, which is fantastic. However, it does involve the entire family, and it is an ongoing commitment. Sometimes, like, it's an ongoing commitment from the teacher. It's an ongoing commitment for the student, obviously, and sometimes for their families. In my opinion, they are also less work, much less work than the short-term opportunities, and I'll kind of explain why a little bit later when we get to those get to those opportunities. Doesn't mean they're not work. And if something does kind of, there's a hiccup, it can cause you to have to deal with that. Obviously, we're their liaisons, we're their chaperones, we're their coaches, we're their mentors, right? But for the most part, they go quite well, actually. And they're not a ton of work once everything gets going. So I'll explain how that works in just a few minutes. So here I wanted to talk about culture shock. And the reason why I talk about this is it is a misnomer. The ethnographers and the psychologists and the sociologists that have compiled massive amounts of work to come up with this notion have done a fantastic job outlining what it is. But maybe in its earliest forms, it was maybe given a name that wasn't quite perfect for the phenomenon. And it is a phenomenon, and it is a widespread psychological phenomenon that people can study. It happens, okay? So, as I mentioned, sometimes people think that culture shock is all of a sudden you're in a new environment. There I am in China, and it's all very different. And ooh, I can't read the menu. And ooh, people are talking to me, and I'm scared. And ooh, I don't know how things work. That's cultural trauma. You're in a foreign place, and I don't mean to kind of negate that, but with this, you remove yourself, and you're fine. Okay, that's cultural trauma. It is not the same as culture shock. Culture shock is a radical reconfiguration of an individual's identity. It's much more intense, and it's a long-term process. And so what this means is at the start of the process and at the end of the process, the person who went through this is not the same person, okay? They view the world differently. They view themselves differently. They view their friends differently. They view their family differently. They view their culture differently. And that is a difficult experience. It can be a fantastic, amazing experience to go through, but it is also not an easy experience to go through. And it sometimes takes years to actually get through and make your way through culture shock. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at this fancy graph. So first, you may have heard a little bit about this already, but you imagine you're now a 16, 17-year-old kid. We're gonna use the teenagers as an example, and all of a sudden you're given an opportunity and the privilege to then go and live in a new environment with a different language and a different culture. At first, you get there; it's the honeymoon stage. It might actually last, 0 to 2 months. Often, it lasts that long. So some of our experiences aren't long enough to allow kids to go through culture shock. Okay, so they spend a couple months in this new environment, and it's great. It's fantastic. It's beautiful. It's exciting. It's interesting. Everything is new. It can be scary for sure. It can be intimidating. Absolutely. You're starting to find your place, but you feel very much like an outsider. And you feel very much like an outsider. And after a while, that starts to get to you a little bit. And you start to maybe think, oh, I don't my moods are a little bit interesting. Sometimes you don't even necessarily know that you're going through this at this point, but you're thinking, okay, I've been here for 2 months, and now maybe the allure of it, the shininess of it all is starting to wear. And now what have I done to myself? Why am I here? And this is often it's the second lowest point that individuals experience while going through culture shock. After about 2 to 4 months, you start to clue into elements of deep culture. And we talk about surface culture and deep culture. Deep culture is completely invisible. Surface culture, the food, the music, the transportation, the architecture, the whatever, the greetings, that's all surface level. When you start to notice that these people think very differently, and sometimes they will agree on things, sometimes they don't, but they have different notions of hygiene. They have different notions of morality. They have different notions of good and evil. They have different notions of which character traits are desirable. For example, Anglophones are often taught to be outgoing, and they're often taught to be enthusiastic. Many cultures don't. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, and so you start to realize a whole bunch of these things. And you start to kind of first of all almost like attack the other culture. When you first get there, you begin to mimic. You mimic and make it mimic, and you try and be like them. Then you almost start to go on the defensive, and you're like, and you kind of start to say, well, my culture is better, and at home it was better than this. And then you go through periods of avoidance, and you'd be like, whoa, this experience is a lot. These people are too much, and I want to avoid. And you kind of go into your internalness. And then you start to pull yourself out of that. You start to go through these swings. And these swings are, it's not so bad here. Whoa, this culture is superior and just better than my other culture. Though everything is better here. Nope, just kidding. Everything here is worse. Well, maybe some things are better. Maybe some things are not. And then at the end, you start to come to this, you almost play cognitive dissonance. And you can conceive an issue. You can conceive a societal notion. You can conceive all of these things from two different ways of viewing, two different cultures, two different languages, or even more. And you slowly come to terms with that. Okay? And then you're great. You start to integrate. You start to really make strong language progress. And then you come home. And this is one thing as a teacher and as someone who went through this really twice, I was not expecting this. The reverse culture shock is often much more severe and more difficult than the initial honeymoon stages and the initial culture shock. Now, because you're now removed from this experience and you've developed a new identity and a new way of thinking and a new way of doing things, a new way of being. And then you are thrown back into your old self. And you have to learn how to relive and how you have to relearn your culture. And I know that sounds weird. It's you don't forget, but you kind of do forget. And that can be very difficult for families and very difficult for students. And I get emails or phone calls from families that are like, I don't even recognize my kid, and they're crying all the time, and they're angry, and like, what's happening? And you're like, that's actually reverse culture shock. And just so you know, they will get over it. It takes time. Sometimes it can take months. Sometimes it can take like up to a year. Sometimes it's a lifelong experience in many ways to kind of become bicultural and bilingual and all of that. And for example, I remember once being intensely coming back to Alberta after living in Europe for a long time, being intensely angry at parking lots, like irrationally angry at parking lots, and having to think like I need to like actually come to terms with this. So it's a little bit funny, there's like 1,000 things that happen in that regard. Okay. So let's now talk about these long-term opportunities. Okay, so we basically have a few minutes to talk about these opportunities. So number one, Alberta Ed Exchanges. These exchanges are fantastic. They are organized and funded by Alberta Ed. There is dedicated staff that is fantastic, that believe in travel, that will really try and make this work. For the French exchanges, there are two different types of exchanges that our students can embark on. One of them is brand spanking new, and it is an 8-week exchange to France. They go to the Rhône-Alpes region of France, and it's in its first pilot year. So one of my students is the guinea pigs. They're off on this pilot exchange to France for 8 weeks. Their partner is currently in our Alberta school, so that's fantastic. It is a reciprocal exchange. So what that means is you basically, one family sends their kid, and then later on another family sends their kid. So kids are matched with a partner, but they don't just swap places. That happens in some exchanges, but doesn't happen in any of the. It does happen in one experience I'm going to talk about. So basically, the French student comes here first for Sem 1 and spend some time in Sem 1. Then they go home. Then there's a break, and each kid lives in their own family. And then in Sem 2, the Alberta student goes and joins their French partner in their Francophone environment. Okay. If students are going to France, parents pay for the flights, and they take on the cost of hosting a new French student. So obviously you got to pay for food, you got to pay for shelter, which they're paying for anyway. They, if they want to take their kids to Banff or to Drumheller or whatever, out of the generosity of their hearts, it's certainly not required, but they can. Okay, they would cover the cost of that. They would not ask, for example, the French family to be like, I'm going to take your kid to Banff, give me money for the hotel room. No, that's not going to happen. It's generosity. And they do have to pay for school transport. So if the kid takes the bus, it is the Alberta family that actually pays for the bus pass, not the French family. Okay, there's some other things in there too, but for this, we're just giving an overview. For the Quebec exchange, they could be going anywhere in the entire province, and I've sent kids to basically all four corners of Quebec, except maybe the Ungava Peninsula up in the north. This is a great exchange. It is 3 months, so it is 12 weeks. And this is a reciprocal exchange. It works the exact same way as a French exchange. So the Quebec student comes to Alberta first. They're here for 3 months. Then they go home. And then in Sem 2, usually in February, the Alberta student then goes and lives with them for 3 months. And then the Alberta student comes back in April. Alberta Ed, because it is in Canada, pays for the cost of travel. No flights. Parents take on the same cost as they would for the French exchange, the cost of hosting a Quebec student. It's a fantastic opportunity. Now, both of these Alberta Ed exchanges, the Alberta Ed sends chaperones with the students when they travel there and when they travel back. And I have done it before. So off to Quebec, you get sent off to Quebec with the kids. If you're traveling with the kids, you visit them in all of their schools. So you rent a car, you drive around, you visit them in all their schools, make sure everything is good, you fly home. And then if you're on the chaperone duty of picking up the kids, you fly there, you pick up the kids. There's a lot of tears in the airport as they say goodbye to their host families and their host parents, like a lot of tears. Like it's like, whoa, okay. But that means it's kind of a great experience. And then you fly back with the kids, bring your Kleenex, it's going to be okay. And it's a great opportunity for the students. And if you can be a chaperone, then it's a great opportunity for teachers too. You've worked hard to send these kids. And every once in a while, you're not going to go every year, but every once in a while it works in your favor. You get to go. Great. Your role, you're the liaison teacher. You have to do a home visit during the application process. And you talk about the exchange. You kind of, check out the home just in the sense like, would I let my child stay here in this home? Yes, they're going to be a good host family. You're the main day-to-day contact for the exchange student and parents. When the Quebec kid or the French kid comes to your school, you work with your admin and whatever processes you have to get them a schedule, and you advise and you check in on them every once in a while, and it's great. It's actually a lot of fun. You help schedule the students. Their grades don't matter. They can fail everything. In fact, they probably will, because depending on their level of English when they come here or your student's level of French, it might go well, it might not go well. Grades don't count. Do your best, okay? Major issues are dealt with by Alberta Ed, so that's nice. And the deadline to apply is mid-March, the year before they go. So it's a whole year application kind of process. They find out by the end of their grade 10 year. And then their grade 11 year they go. So it's not on the slide, but grade 11 is the year that kids go on this trip here. The next slide here is the YMCA Summer Work Exchange Program. I love this program, and I send lots of kids on this program every year. It's fantastic. Oh, it's just like the best. If I don't know how long this has been going on for, but I wish I would have known about it, because I certainly would have went on it as a high school student. Basically, it's organized by the YMCA, and they send students who are 16 or 17 years old, not 18, and they make that pretty clear, to somewhere French. Done. It's like the easiest thing. So they apply, they have to do a little interview, and students live with a Francophone family for basically the whole summer. And they can do it in their grade. They have to be 16, so depending on how old they can do it in their grade 10 or 11 summer, or their grade 11 and 12 summer. Transportation is covered, so they send the kids to Quebec or New Brunswick for free. For free. I think it costs $250 as an application fee. Like, it's for free. It is kind of expected that the Alberta family since they're sending a kid, that they will also welcome a Quebec kid or a Francophone kid. But it's not a requirement. And I've had many arrangements where I've got this kid that says, I really, really want to go on this opportunity, but my family just can't host a kid, or it's just not a good environment for a kid, or it's just my family's going to travel, or anything. The YMCA will work with other families to find that French kid a host. It could even be a cousin, could be a friend, could be a whoever, right? So they are very flexible and very accommodating. Um, your role in this, send the YMCA. It's called the summer work student employment program. That's the technical thing. They call it like SWASI. You can have them come in and talk to your class. Great, send an email. They show up either virtually or in person if you're in a major urban center. You direct students to the application. They fill out the application. You, as a recommending teacher, you fill out like this form. It's easy. 15 minutes, 10 minutes, done. And the deadline is usually April and May. So you can send lots of kids on this exchange. Virtually no work for you. An amazing experience. The kids come back. They love life. It's a fantastic program. This one you've probably heard about, Explore. And I actually send fewer kids on Explore than on the YMCA. Many of my students have done Explore. It's very popular. It can be a little bit competitive as well. So, you can apply and there might not be spots, and that's a sign of a successful program. That's great. So there are two cohorts. So one ages 13 to 15, the other one 16 plus. They're different lengths, you can see there. They're sent to a Francophone environment in Canada in the summer as well. It's a little bit shorter than the YMCA exchange. Transportation is covered to and from. I'm pretty sure it is, depending. There's other programs they have even for older kind of adults and students too, where it's not covered, but usually it's covered. Students stay in university dorms and campuses, which can be a great experience for kids. They have a lot of fun. All of the workshops, their time is completely organized from dawn till dusk, the entire time that they're there. So they've got workshops, cultural activities included, and they're all free. What an amazing opportunity for our kids. Students must be Canadian citizens or a permanent resident. That actually goes for most of these opportunities as well. And your role is you can invite an Explore rep to your class. You direct students to the application. Again, you fill out a really easy recommendation. Done. That's it for Explore. It's a fantastic thing. Apply early. The deadline is February 3rd. It is often competitive. There are more students apply than can go most years. So you might want to direct kids to say, if you're thinking about this, you should really apply in January, in December. You really should apply. And it's not a hard application, especially for the teacher. You can help the kids, but you got to put that effort on the kids, coach them through it. But it's nothing that they can't handle and that you can't handle. There are many year-long exchange opportunities, but there are some companies that will do that, and then that's just you're just paying for your kid to go over there, and it's a kind of a different thing. So there's other companies that can do that, but the one that I would want to talk about is the Rotary International Exchange. And this is like the Rolls Royce of exchanges. It really is the Rolls Royce. If you have a student that goes through the process of applying and gets chosen and gets sent, like it is a really amazing opportunity. And so students between 15 and 17 years old, they get sponsored by their local Rotary Club that makes a connection with another Rotary Club somewhere in the world, and they ship their kid off to that country to live with host families for an entire year. Sometimes they live with the same host family for a whole year. Sometimes they change host families after 3 or 4 months, or two host families. It really kind of depends. These host families host the student out of the generosity of their own hearts. They require no payment. They're usually fantastic, amazing, giving, generous individuals that are vetted by their Rotary clubs already. The students could go anywhere, not just a Francophone country. They could go anywhere. So for example, when I lived in Norway, I went as a Rotary exchange student. to Norway. And I was not expecting to go to Norway. I didn't have a choice. When I went to Norway, they said, "You're going to Norway. You don't know you want to go to Norway, but that's actually where you want to go." And they were right. And and what an amazing experience. Students are often required to do an extra year of schooling when they return. This is a major, major life opportunity, and it is worth the extra year of high school. That should not. You might have to coax some kids through that and be like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's worth it. If you've got to come back and do grade 13, you won't regret it for a single second. Um, and costs vary depending on your local Rotary Club. Sometimes it's completely free. Most of the time, it is ridiculously cheap. Like as in like you, if a family is struggling, for example, but they've got like just like the most deserving kid that really wants to travel abroad and all of that, the Rotary Club will work with that family. They really want to choose a kid that wants to go, and it's for the students that are most motivated and the most deeply interested in language and culture as well. Um, because it is an application process, it is competitive, and so you've got to kind of think of who would go with that. And for me, this is an opportunity that sometimes like I'll tap a student on the shoulder and be like, you know what, give it a shot. This is the one for you. It's Go apply, contact the Rotary Club, and see if they can do an exchange. And good luck. I've got your back on this one. They're going to need somebody in their corner rooting for them for this exchange. They really are. Okay, like for example, my grade 10 French teacher was in my back corner helping me go on this, and was a major factor in that happening. The Rotary Club is really fun. The kids are actually given this red jacket, and every country has a different color jacket, and the kids put pins on them. It's all really fun. So these are all Canadians because they're wearing red jackets. We have red. For example, the Japanese students have yellow, and the Finnish students have blue, and it's all fun. Okay. Your role, you're basically a reference. That's it. You're a reference for them. You don't have anything to do with the organizing or the vetting or anything like that. You're a reference, and you point kids in that direction. And so now, what about the short-term experiences? These are fantastic experiences. These are a ton of fun. You're traveling with the kids, or you're kind of going to do a quick homestay, and they're great. Okay. I've done that many, many times with many groups of students, and I continue to do it because it's great. And I forgot to mention too, all of these photos in this PowerPoint, they are all photos of places that I have been with students. So I forgot to mention that at the start. But yeah, so here's Paris. Here is Quebec City. Here is Chateau Versailles. Right. So let's talk about what are some of them. One is called Experience Canada or Experience Canada. It used to be called CEVEC. So you might be familiar with CEVEC. It's now called Experience Canada. Same program, different name. Basically what happens, it is class to class, group to group. You apply and you say, I want to take my kids to Quebec. I want to take my kids to the high north. I want my kids to live in an indigenous community. Super cool. And so you apply with this idea, and you can go on their website. They have lots of ideas. You'll be inspired to do lots of stuff. You apply. Once you kind of get chosen, it costs $250 per person, which is nothing. Like for what you get is nothing. And you can fundraise. You can do whatever you need to cover that two per person if you want. And then the organization matches you with another group that's kind of similar to your group and has similar interests. And then you decide the timeline. Plane tickets and chaperones and everything is covered. They don't pay for that. And what happens is you do a swap, basically. Not a swap, but you first, you can decide your kids might go to that community, live with those families for a little bit, do kind of activities, and then they do the opposite. They mirror that. Your school is responsible for transportation. So let's say that your kids are in, I don't know, you're in Red Deer and you want to take the kids to, I don't know, you want to take the kids to Drumheller, or you want to take the kids to West Ed, or you want to take the kids to Calgary or to Banff. Well, then you would be paying for that actually. And you might have to fundraise and what have you in order to do that. But you choose, you're the master of your own destiny with this exchange. They're incredibly flexible. They're basically like, you have an idea and it involves students making connections with other students. Here's lots of money to do that. Plan ahead. The application is lengthy, but it's well worth it. You've got to organize your participant lists and everything. It's much more involved. It's not hard. You've got to vet your host families if you're doing a homestay, and this can be tricky because it can be incredibly time consuming. Many boards require criminal record checks, so you got to get your families to do criminal record checks. Some boards don't want you to do home visits. That's a conversation for you and your board. Exceptions can be made. There's no law, just so you know. I've dropped that line before. There's no law that says this. Look it up, okay? But right, so there's that can be tricky, right? You and your colleagues get to participate as well. Of course, you've got to get approval from your school board, like a field trip form or whatever your board and school approval process is. You've got to go through it. Lots of work. Fantastic. And this is one that I really want to dream about. I really want to take my kids up to an Indigenous community in the Arctic or somewhere. I really think that would be a fantastic experience, and then bring those kids to Edmonton. I think that would be really great. Canada Sports Friendship and Exchange Program, it actually operates the exact same way as Experience Canada. They actually get their funding from the same model, from the federal government and everything. The costs are a little bit different. Generally, it's just kind of a little bit leans towards sports. So maybe you want to bring like a hockey team over and your team can play hockey or lacrosse, or maybe you just want to do activities. It's really, really flexible. The only thing they say is like it is a sports exchange, but it is not a tournament. It is non-competitive. You are not bringing another school in order to butt heads and have this huge competition. No, you're going to have friendly competition. It's in the name, really. Plan ahead. It works almost the exact same way as the Experience Canada opportunity. The next is independent travel, and that means you're just traveling with your kids. And so we have done this many times. I've done this many times. You do not want to do this alone. So, for example, you do not want to be the one that's like, well, let's buy plane tickets and I'm going to be the travel agent and I'm going to organize this trip. No, it is too much work for you. It is too much liability. It's a bad idea. But these educational companies exist. There are many, but I'm only going to talk about the ones that I know that are reputable, okay? And that doesn't mean the ones I don't talk about aren't reputable. But EF Tours and Explorica are two big names. Go talk to them during Teachers Convention. They have really good swag, okay? You can travel with students pretty much any age. It's usually class or group travel abroad or, I said abroad or internationally. I mean domestic or internationally. Parents pay for travel 100% out of pocket, okay? And so, for example, if you're going to go to, like, we're going to go to Costa Rica this year with students, it's about $5,000. I've taken kids to China, to Peru, to Spain, to France, to Germany, to wherever, Italy, Greece, Turkey, on and on goes the list. Around $5,000. Okay, that's probably what it's going to cost. There's a cutoff. You have to have a minimum amount of students, and if you don't, you could be matched with another school. That could be a good thing. That could be a bad thing. We generally don't want to be matched with another school because you're kind of rolling the dice. Generally, our kids are actually quite well behaved. Not all schools from different countries and from different provinces are, right? So you kind of roll the dice. I've had some fantastic experiences and some not so good experiences traveling with other schools. So keep that in mind as well. The best experience, I'm from a very urban, central Edmonton school, like a lot of city kids, only city kids. And we once went with a group of kids from like a village in Alberta that has a population of like 500. And those kids got along so well. And they were, all those kids were really well behaved, right? So that was such a positive experience. I traveled once, and really I've only matched with a different school twice. I went once with a group, and we were matched with an American school, and it didn't go very well. And it ended up me being like, you guys are just going to go do your own thing, and I'm going to go take my kids to do my own thing because your kids are a lot to handle, and my kids aren't. So all that to say is, if you can get enough kids to travel alone, which is usually like, I don't know, like 20 kids or something like that, then you're golden. The families have to pay for tips and spending money, and the cost for supply teachers. So when you give out tips to your tour guides, the students don't do that. You just collect all the money at the start. You give out the money as needed. There's usually a 1 to 6 or 1 to 8 student chaperone ratio. Chaperones travel for free, so that means you get to travel for free, and maybe some of your colleagues. Travel is greatly facilitated and supported by these private companies. They take all of the liability. They have mechanisms in place for when things don't go well, or when you go and the tourist attraction is closed. Oh my God, what do you do? Woof, they pivot on a dime. They're fantastic. Um, your role is you have to travel. You have to plan this trip in conjunction with your chosen travel company. They already have a whole bunch of itineraries made out. You can choose whatever you want, just so you know. Okay, they have this huge book, and you can flip through all of the trips. You can deviate from that as much as you want. You just got to work with them, okay? And they'll give you a new price. You and your colleagues act as chaperones. You have to organize the trip, participant list, parent contacts, parent info nights. It can be a little bit of work, okay? These companies have websites. Then the kids enroll on the website, and the parents pay on the website. It makes it a little bit easier. But you got to have your email lists and all of that, you know. You're responsible for the students while traveling, period. You are responsible for your students. You are often given, I mean, with EF tours, you are 100% given a tour guide that follows you from the moment you get off that plane to the moment you leave. And they follow you wherever you're going. And then there'll be local guides. So if you're going to multiple cities and doing multiple things, your main tour guide follows you the whole time. And then you meet these local guides that are experts in their cities or wherever you're going. And then you give tips to those. And they EF tours and Explorer, they tell you exactly how much to give. It's pretty easy. It obviously will require approval from your board. So field trip forms, whatever needs to be done in Edmonton Public. You got to plan this at least 5-6 months in advance, at least. Okay, it doesn't necessarily take that long, but that gives you a lot of margin, kind of room for error. So what are some of the best practices? So this is our last slide. What are some pieces of advice when you're doing this? The first time you're doing it, it can be a little bit scary. And then you realize it's no more scary than your regular job, and it's actually a lot of fun. But of course, the first time you get through something, it can be uncomfortable and it's unknown, and that's part of the magic of it. And that's also, you got to embrace that. If you want to give that to your students, embrace that. I highly recommend that you speak about these opportunities frequently and often, every year, and talk about them and talk about them and talk about them, and students will start to listen. Email the parents about the opportunities too. You want to send kids that want to go. If their parents want the kid to go and the kid doesn't want to go, don't take the kid. Don't. Bad idea. If the parents are pushing, no, the parents aren't going, right? The kid's going. And if they don't want to go, don't send them. But contacting parents about these opportunities can be a really good thing, because you've got actually some kids that are like, my mom will never say yes to something like this. Never, ever in 100 years. And then mom is the first one that emails me, this sounds great. You know what? I'm going to talk to whoever about this. And you go, that wasn't expecting that, actually. Have participating students advocate for you. So if you've got exchange students from France or from Quebec, bring them into your French classroom, and the kids get to talk to them, and they're super fun, and all of that. And then when kids are back, I always get the students that did the opportunity that year, and they're back home in Alberta. They talk to like my grade 10 kids. They come in and do a little presentation, just super informal, just like, I went here and this is what I did and this is how it's cool and this is why you should go. And that's the best you can do. Like that, they sell the program themselves, right? As I mentioned, do not send kids who do not want to go. If you wouldn't, and if you wouldn't have that kid stay in your home, think about that, right? Would you want that kid to stay in your home for 3 months or 2 weeks or whatever? Would you do that to another family, right? And that kind of says a lot. You have to gain your staff and admin support. This is essential. You've got a whole admin team that has to register these kids, that has to choose their schedules, that has to do all of these things. It requires a little bit of work on there. If they see the value in these programs, they'll gladly do it, right? Home visits are essential for long-term exchanges or homestay programs. You gotta talk to the families. You gotta get a feel for those families. You've gotta really um, you got to see what's kind of going on there, because the more you know, the fewer surprises there are, and that's what makes these experiences exciting, but also sometimes a little bit frightening and intimidating as a teacher or even as a participant and as a host family, because you don't know, right? There's some very, you never know how people are going to react and how people are going to be and all of that, and so you gotta visit the homes and open up those communication channels. Another thing that I will mention, without getting super specific, I've got lots of specific advice about these individual programs. You should really think about if you're going to take parent chaperones. I actually recommend firmly against it. And here's why. Um, if you are with a colleague and your colleague is traveling, your colleague is obliged to behave in a professional manner and likely will, because they're already a professional. Their job is, I don't want to say their job is on the line, right? But you know what I just said. They've got to be professional, and they will take their roles seriously. Parents sometimes don't, and with the best intentions. Parents are sometimes the biggest liability that you have, because they're adults and you can't tell them what to do, and you can't tell them, you know what, you really shouldn't drink. You really shouldn't just leave the tour. You really shouldn't all of these things, blah, 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 blah. And the other thing is, when you travel with parents sometimes say, well, it's okay. My kid can go do this. I'm with them, so it's okay. Me and my kid are going to do this, or my kid can do that. And that puts you in a really awkward position when you actually have to say, in fact, no. Like on this trip, like, I'm like the tour leader, and the answer is no. And right. The other reason is parents pay a lot more attention to their own kids than to all of the kids. They don't make you sure, some parents can be fantastic chaperones, absolutely. Maybe in your context you need them, right? Maybe you do. um Take that as you will. I won't travel with parents. I just don't, and I won't. And it makes my life easier. But maybe your context is very different from mine, and you know better than I do what you and your program need, right? So there you go. So with that, merci beaucoup. So when this recording is sent out, if you're listening to this, then you can always send me an email if you've got a specific question. They are fantastic opportunities, and I really hope that you can have as many students participate in these activities as possible, because they really are truly something, and they can be really fun for you. They can be a major perk of your job. So with that, thank you for your time and attention, and have a great day, everybody. See you later.